Okay, so today I'm going to do a movie review, which is something it seems like I haven't been doing much lately. And this time I'm going to be talking about The Witch, which emerged after the director was said to be trying to make movies that were too weird, too obscure. So The Witch is a 2015 horror film written and directed by Robert Eggers. It's a gripping tale of family and survival in 17th century New England. And, you know, I'm not too familiar with 1630s New England, but it's said to be a realistic depiction of life back then. The film follows a Puritan family who apparently encounters a supernatural force of some sort, and of course, it's on the malevolent, evil side, and it happens to be in the wilderness that's just beyond their farm. And, it's a witch, basically, or the witch, you might say, or so the characters believe. And that's one of the interesting things about this movie, even though one critique I've heard of The Witch is that they probably shouldn't have actually shown The Witch because it makes it more real to the viewer and that sort of thing. And it's a little bit like the Blair Witch Project, though. Some people criticize that movie for not showing the witch, so it's one of those things where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. In this one, they do happen to show some sort of witch in the woods, and it's up to no good, as you might suspect. And really, I don't critique it for depicting the witch because quite simply, just because it does show a witch doesn't mean it's a real witch. It might be just a representation of what the characters in the movie believe. So I kind of don't 100% agree with that critique of the movie. I suppose it might be more effective to some people if they didn't show it, but again, to me, it's more like just because the movie shows it doesn't really mean it's there. I was able to infer that when I watched it, even on the first time. But anyway, the family struggles with issues like religious devotion and fear of damnation, and their isolation is intensifying at all times, and paranoia is setting in, all that fun stuff. The film received critical acclaim for its atmospheric tension, period accurate dialogue, and unsettling imagery. The gore and brutality in Scott Derrickson's Sinister is probably more memorable to some people, or certain movies that have like lots of blood and gore are probably going to resonate with certain horror movie fans more. But honestly, I think that this movie really does deliver on the tension and the imagery and all that sort of stuff. It's about as well done as something like Sinister, maybe even better in some respects because it's a little bit more of a mystery, I think. Anyway, it premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in January 2015 and was released theatrically in February 2016. So that's why you might, see different dates for when the movie came out. It's one of those sorts of things. So you might be confused, like one site will say, oh, it came out in 2015, another will say 2016, but really it's from 2015 when it was first unveiled to the world. It's a movie that's often praised for its meticulous attention to historical detail and its ability to create an oppressive atmosphere. It explores themes of religious extremism, family dynamics, and the fear of the unknown. And of course, there's a bunch of psychology associated with all of those story elements. And it stars Anya Taylor Joy in her first movie, her feature film debut. I don't know if it's Anya or Anya. I assume it's Anya. And it also has Ralph Ineson, Kate Dickey, Harvey Scrimshaw and Ellie Granger, among some other people. It doesn't really have that big of a cast because it's sort of an isolated movie. The Witch marked Robert Eggers' directorial debut and solidified him as a promising talent in the horror genre and presumably beyond. Eggers was originally going to make a Nosferatu remake after this, but, he kind of shelved it, saying that it feels ugly and blasphemous and egomaniacal and disgusting for a filmmaker in my place to do Nosferatu next. I was really planning on waiting a while, but that's how fate shook out. But he actually did end up waiting for a little while, so his Nosferatu remake will be at some point in the future. I'm not sure how close or far it will be, but I do have to say, if anybody is going to remake Nosferatu, it might be this guy. I think he's got some real skills when it comes to, creating that sort of freaky atmosphere. So, basically, as far as the plot goes, I've kind of explained most of it. It's about a Puritan family that lives on the edge of a large forest. There's a lot of story elements that might bring to mind, the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts, or apparently there was another witch scare type of event in Norwich, Connecticut, and of course in Europe that was pretty common in history as well. The farm serves as their only source of subsistence and, presumably income, and they spend their days tending the land and caring for their livestock. So you kind of get a snapshot of what life might have been like then, and it frankly seems kind of terrible. I don't think this movie really makes life during that time look very appealing. The story opens with an apparently kidnapped, though possibly abandoned or murdered child. It's said to be the witch that takes it, and you even kind of see it happen. But at the same time, there's sort of an implication that something else might have happened, or that maybe the child just disappeared, which can actually happen. Sometimes even babies or toddlers can just disappear, and it's not even necessarily like somebody kidnapped them or something like that. Just something bad might have happened. And so in that sense, this movie really is a tragic tale. And you've got the paranoia that ensues and all that kind of stuff about what happened to the child. It's really a drama, and with a lot of horror elements to it. The story is that the witch came out of the woods and adopted the child, so to speak, only it wasn't to give the baby a new family. It was to use the baby in creation of, some sort of flying ointment. That's one of the classic, I guess, fairy tale myths about witches, is that they sacrifice virgin children to use their, maybe their body fat in order to fly and stuff like that. So some pretty far out stuff if you really think about it. And I've talked about, the paranoia about witches before on this podcast, and how some people still believe in that sort of stuff, and how it's actually kind of scary that we're in this day and age and some people still believe in this kind of stuff. And I really think, as far as the performances go, a lot of people will remember the character of Thomason, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. She's sort of maybe somebody who might steal the show for a lot of people. Although I think all the performances are pretty great, though, to be honest. And, it's you've got Sarah Stevens as the witch, playing the young witch, like the hot witch. And man, she really is hot. Like, so you've got like the fake sort of spell casting seductress witch, and then you've got the old witch played by Bathsheba Garnett. And I was feel weird about like casting decisions like that, because does the actress playing the old witch in this case feel at all offended that they were cast as sort of like this old crone like figure? Or are they sort of able to tolerate that? Because basically, the characters, if you're playing a witch, chances are going to be exaggeratedly uglified, because that's really one of the stereotypes about witches, and at least satanic witches. They're often depicted as like green skin or something. And this movie doesn't really take it that far. The witch doesn't have green skin, at least not that I was able to notice. And but it's one of those questions I ask whenever there's a role like this, or like, sort of the fat guy in a movie. Like, how does somebody cope with playing that role? Or the fat lady, whatever the role is, like some character that has some trait that is sort of depicted in a negative way, like a stereotype or something like that. I do kind of wonder how actors will cope with that if it ever negatively impacts them. But you also have Harvey Scrimshaw's Caleb, who at one point was caught, perhaps not quite leering, but staring at his sister's cleavage. So that's a bit of an awkward moment in the movie. And it kind of hints a little bit at the sexual tension of being isolated with your family. I mean, it's really a creepy dynamic. But if you're alone and you're reaching the age of puberty, what are you going to do? You have nothing, no one around except for your family members and stuff like that. It's got to be an awkward thing. So in a way, I don't think it's trying to like vilify the character of Caleb or make him into that big of a pervert, but it's kind of hinting at this weird dynamic of being isolated out in the woods and growing up mostly with your family as your primary social life, yet going through these changes that everybody's pretty much destined to go through unless you never reach that age of puberty somehow, I suppose. And you also have fraternal twins characters named Mercy, that's played by Ellie Granger, and Jonas, who is played by Lucas Dawson. And that's basically the family for you. And really, I think one of the things that this movie will encourage is if you do happen to see a witch hiding out in your barn or whatever, you'll probably want to beat her with her own broomstick and say, "Get out of here, witch, shoo." Because witches, they're bitches. I think that's really one of the moral lessons here.